Good morning, storytellers, and welcome back to StoryForge Academy. Today's session is one of the most important in your entire journey as screenwriters. Because today, we don't just write stories. We create people who live inside them. We're diving into characterization, the art of building human beings on the page who breathe, make mistakes, fall in love, betray, break, and rise again. By the end of this class, you'll know how to shape a protagonist with a clear goal, an antagonist who reflects their flaws, and supporting characters who serve as emotional mirrors. We'll also explore one of the deepest tools in storytelling, the character arc, how a person changes from who they were to who they must become. So grab your notebook and imagination, because today's lesson is all about the beating heart of your screenplay. And if you're new here, don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe to StoryForge Academy, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next masterclass. Each week we break down new dimensions of cinematic storytelling, went from structure and dialogue to rhythm, tone, and emotional truth. Now let's begin. Let's open the script of the soul and learn how to make your characters unforgettable. Just then, I saw two figures approaching our room. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. The door swung open. The two men entered and began to speak to the Indian woman. She no longer had the strength to cry. No soul left, no power to sob, no tears left to shed. The two men left. I moved toward her, and she in turn pulled me into a desperate embrace. Her voice was barely a whisper against my ear. "These bastards say a real master, forger from Egypt, will arrive in 2 or 3 days," she pulled back slightly, her eyes empty. "They said, you only have 2 or 3 days left to enjoy the last pleasures of your life. They said tonight the Khan wants to stay in this caravanserai, and he wants to make it the best night of your life." I didn't understand. "What does that mean?" I asked. She explained, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "That day they brought us here. They wanted to break us, to make us do anything to survive. They showed us the mummifying body of a little girl and said, 'Which one of you is willing to become an eternal mummy? We only need one of you.' They told us, 'Tonight, whoever can satisfy the Khan will live. And so, if you don't want to be the one who gets mummified, tonight you must please him with Indian dancing, singing with flirtation, and giving in to his every sexual desire.'" She closed her eyes, a shudder running through her. That night, my friend and I felt like we were competing in the most breathless race in the world, with life as the reward. We danced, we sang, we exposed ourselves, we submitted to his every sexual demand. Finally, the Khan said, "You are both excellent. I cannot choose." He took a coin from his pocket, flipped it, and the lot fell to my friend. Her voice broke, then continued with a chilling resignation. "Now, these two bastards say either enjoy yourself for the next 2 or 3 days, or they'll finish you off." The Indian woman simply replied, "No." They told her they'd be back in an hour. Either she would go with them willingly, or they would drag her body to the cellar for the master to begin his work. I was going mad. I saw a grim, resolute certainty in the Indian woman's face. She was ready for death. It was as if in the past 2 months, she had died and come back to life 1,000 times. And now, death itself was old news to her. "I have friends," I pleaded, my voice hoarse. "They will surely come in 2 days. We will be saved. Please, don't surrender to death." Tears streamed down her face as she looked at me, a flicker of desperate hope in her eyes. "Are you sure there's a chance? Will your friends really come for us?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Don't doubt it," I insisted, forcing conviction into my voice. "Just stay alive." Just then the door opened. The Indian woman, still looking at me with pleading eyes, was led out of the room. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving me alone in the suffocating darkness. I sank to the floor, weeping, tears burning my cheeks. Why did I lie to her? What hope? Why did I force her to endure 2 more humiliating days only to die? I hated myself. 2 days in purgatory, buried alive and brought back. Ruben's story to Maria. Ruben took a deep breath, as if the bitter taste of dirt still lingered in his mouth. 2 days passed in the graveyard-like silence of that accursed room in the caravanserai compound. It was as if not even a bird dared to fly. There was no coming and going. It seemed everyone there was reveling and enjoying themselves in their nests. And this, like a sledgehammer, pounded constantly on my soul and mind, especially with the Indian woman's fate. The guilt of lying to that Indian woman would be my greatest torment forever. I cursed myself, wondering how I would ever look her in the eyes again if we met. I was left thirsty and hungry. This could only mean one thing: death. They didn't care about me. I was nothing more than a walking corpse. On the appointed day, the harsh, roaring sound of a distant car approaching and then stopping brought the commotion and brutal life back to the caravanserai. It seemed both the Egyptian master forger and the Khan were present. Noon came, and the familiar, heart-wrenching sound of a shovel and pickaxe reached my ears again. A cold shiver ran down to my very bones. I knew this grave now belonged to me. I desperately wanted to mourn myself, to grieve for my impending death. I wept. I was dying without ever seeing my child. Without Anna, I wept for myself and my bitter fate. Sometimes a flicker of thought sparked in my mind that perhaps they intended to bury the expert woman, but I immediately dismissed it. No, if that were the case, why would they have kidnapped her? So this grave was exclusively for me. For about an hour, to the rhythm of the shovel and pickaxe pounding on my soul like a war drum, I wept in my absolute solitude. I was to be buried forever, far from everyone I loved, in a strange place, in a desolate building in an unknown desert. Finally, the door creaked open. 2 men entered and, with a harsh gesture, ordered me to get up. But I couldn't. My legs were stiff, my lips cracked from extreme thirst. There was no strength left in my body, and psychologically, I was utterly broken. Seeing my inability to rise, they came and lifted me from the floor. With steps that trembled like a weeping willow in the wind, I staggered toward that horrifying pit. It was about 30 meters, but to me, it felt like thousands upon thousands of steps, each one a century of torment. I reached the pit. Moments later, the expert woman was also brought. The Khan, who spoke good Farsi, was arguing furiously with her. Voices escalated, and it seemed the Khan had failed to persuade her to cooperate. Suddenly, the Khan gestured to one of his men, and that man brutally threw me into the pit and began to bury me alive. Cold, heavy dirt poured over me with each shovel. I couldn't even scream. I was mute, my tongue tied. The feeling of suffocation, of being buried alive. Shovel after shovel of dirt was thrown over me when all at once everything stopped. An absolute silence followed. It seemed the expert woman had, at the last moment, declared her readiness to cooperate. They pulled me out of the pit. Only then did they realize that my leg was severely broken and injured. Still covered in dirt, they dragged me back to that accursed room. This time my hands were unbound, but I had a broken leg, a liberation more painful than captivity itself. Death of a hope, Ruben's final descent. Ruben's voice was a whisper now, as if emerging from the depths of a bottomless well. A few hours passed. Time in that room, like thick, stagnant blood, moved slowly and lifelessly. Again, the door creaked open. The Indian woman looked at me, and I couldn't bring myself to avert my gaze from her. Her face seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken words. Was it an appeal, a curse, or perhaps a final shred of forgiveness? I don't know. But it felt as if her last wish before death was to see me. They closed the door, and this time, not out of fear, but because of those 2 cursed days, I wept and cried for that woman, tears whose burning heat bore witness to my eternal guilt. A few minutes later, the dry, harsh sound of a gunshot jolted every single cell in my brain, a sound that, in the absolute darkness, was the most ear-splitting end. It was over. That Indian woman, who had been the symbol of the last shred of hope and innocence in this hell, was gone. I slammed my head against the wall. The savage pain, accompanied by blood flowing from my head, was my only escape from my inner madness. Absolute silence, like a heavy blanket, enveloped everything. In that silence, my mind relentlessly conjured images of the cannibal brothers. I saw them tampering with the heart of that tender woman, how they gnawed on her liver, like a delicious blood-soaked meal. A sickening nausea choked me, but I had no strength left to throw anything up. Life held no meaning for me anymore. I was now forever nothing and empty. No purpose, no hope, no meaning. My only desire was the wish for that grave, a place where I could either wake from this nightmare or sleep forever. A glimmer of hope from the darkness, Victor's return. It was dark now, and I was dying of thirst. Every breath was a dagger to my throat. Again, the sound of the door opening echoed, and I no longer knew what to think. What new horror awaited? I just stared at the door. The door swung fully open, and I remained stunned and fixated on the entrance. Victor was looking at me in disbelief. His eyes held 1,000 unanswered questions. He stared at me, a person broken in spirit, physically shattered, covered in dirt, with a bloody face. Only one word, a whisper born of sheer shock, escaped his lips. "Good?" I nodded, unable to speak. Victor immediately came to my aid. Behind him, the expert woman also appeared. Both helped me, and with great difficulty I left the room. Victor, his voice laced with a calming reassurance, said, "It's all over now." My voice was dry and lifeless. "Victor, my world is over. I'm grateful you're here and that you saved the expert woman. But it's too late for me. Just leave me here." I insisted they leave me. I told them I was finished, even for myself, that my soul was dead. Then a familiar sound sent a shiver through my body. It was the scream of a woman whose heart ached for me, filled with concern. It was the Indian woman's voice. She was alive, and I was in absolute shock. My brain was incapable of processing this immense influx of information. I couldn't even bring myself to ask what that gunshot had been. Reality had so far exceeded my imagination that words simply withered in my throat. Rescue in the night. Treasures and Iranian luties. Reuben's story to Maria. Reuben spoke with a deep sense of longing in his voice. It was completely dark now, and I was dying of thirst. My tongue was stuck to the roof of my mouth, and each breath felt like a knife tearing at a dry, raw throat. Again, the sound of the door opening echoed, and I no longer knew what to think. What new incident or event awaited me? I just stared, empty-eyed and lifeless, at the door. The door swung fully open, and I, like a soul separated from his body, stared in stunned disbelief at the entrance. "Victor!" He was looking at me incredibly. Deep shock rippled in his eyes, as if he were staring at a monster. He had every right. I was no longer the Reuben I once was. I was a man broken in spirit, physically shattered, covered in dirt, with a bloody face. Only one word, a whisper born of sheer shock, escaped his lips. "Are you good?" I nodded, unable to speak. My entire being, caught between reality and nightmare, was paralyzed. Victor immediately came to my aid. Behind him, the expert woman also appeared, her gaze filled with concern. Both helped me, taking my arms, and with great difficulty, I left the cursed room. Victor, his voice carrying a calming reassurance that felt like mountains, lifting from my shoulders, said, "It's all over now." My voice trembled. "My world is over, Victor. I'm grateful you're here and that you saved the expert woman. But it's too late for me. Let me stay here. I'm even finished for myself. My soul is dead. I insisted they leave me. Let me drown in the same darkness and emptiness that had consumed me. Then suddenly, at the peak of my despair and restlessness, a familiar sound sent a shiver through my body. It was the scream of a woman whose heart ached for me with concern. A voice so familiar, yet in that moment its sound seemed impossible. It was the Indian woman's voice. She was alive, and I was in absolute shock. My brain was incapable of processing this flood of contradictory information. I was so shocked that I couldn't even bring myself to ask what that gunshot had been. Reality had so far exceeded my imagination that words simply withered in my throat. Even asking a simple question was impossible. The Indian woman, seeing my state, didn't hesitate. She came forward and embraced me tightly. She gently stroked my dirt-laden hair, tenderly pushing the soil from my locks, and said with a choked but resolute voice, "It's truly all over." Meanwhile, the expert woman was talking to the Iranians. They were strange people, all burly and muscular, some with long beards, some clean-shaven, but without exception, all were rough. They all had tattoos, but not like the ones we saw in Germany that were for beauty. These tattoos were clearly amateurish, etched onto their bodies with crude lines and without design or pattern. And my gut feeling told me these tattoos weren't for aesthetics, but perhaps a mark of a specific identity or a hidden pact. All of them, without exception, bore the scars of deep and serious wounds on their hands and in faces, evidence of countless skirmishes. The Indian woman, who had seemingly vanished for a few minutes, returned with several bottles of mineral water. I drank greedily, feeling my spirit return to my body. But still, I couldn't ask any questions. I just gestured with my eyes towards those strange men and their scars. The expert woman smiled, a smile that seemed to hold a hidden bitterness, and said, "In Iran, these are called Arazel-o-Obash, thugs and hooligans. At least from the perspective of the Iranian government and some of the people, but they define themselves as Luti-hai-ba marifat, honorable ruffians. Though I don't know the meaning of Luti." We went outside the caravanserai. 4 black Toyota Prados were waiting, with 10 Iranian men. It was decided that 2 of the Iranians would take the Indian woman to the nearest town so she could report to the police. Then, several chests were brought out, seemingly found in the Khan's room. Chests filled with priceless antiquities and extraordinary ancient artifacts. The Iranians looked at the antiquities with eager anticipation. Victor was talking to Salvador on a satellite phone, and then the leader of the Iranians spoke to someone next to Salvador. It was clear they were discussing the valuable spoils, and finally the Iranian man loudly declared to everyone, 300,000 euros each. Masterclass. Analyzing dramatic structure and emotional arcs. Good morning, class. Today we're dissecting a passage of prose that demonstrates several vital screenwriting principles: escalation, emotional stakes, the false hope beat, and pacing for suspense. While this is prose, the beats are sharp, cinematic, and translate perfectly to the screen. 1. Scene analysis, escalation of fear, and the no-win scenario. The initial scene masterfully sets up a dilemma with impossible stakes for the Indian woman and Reuben. Inciting incident first beat. The 2 men arrive and deliver the devastating news. A master forger is coming, and they only have 2 or 3 days left to enjoy the last pleasures of your life. This is a massive escalation from mere captivity to a ticking clock toward death mummification. The exposition beat, the backstory. The Indian woman recounts the most breathless race in the world, the competition for life, through sexual submission. This is crucial as it establishes precedent. It explains why the Khan is capable of this. barbarity and why the women are utterly broken. This backstory justifies her current final resignation, the climax of the scene, the refusal. The Indian woman's simple, powerful reply, "No." This is a huge character moment. It signifies her emotional death and spiritual victory. She chooses dignity over 2 more days of degradation. In screenwriting, the best decisions often come from having nothing left to lose. Reuben's false hope. Reuben lies, "I have friends. They will surely come in 2 days. We will be saved." This is a critical beat. It's an act of desperate love. But it also becomes his fatal flaw, a lie that saves her life temporarily but poisons his soul with guilt. This guilt becomes his primary tormentor for the next 2 days, substituting for his physical pain and maintaining the dramatic tension even when he is alone. 2. The purgatory sequence, isolating the protagonist. The passage shifts tone, establishing the desolate internal torment of Reuben. The ticking clock. 2 days passed in the graveyard like silence. The silence itself is an active antagonist. It amplifies his isolation. The internal conflict. His greatest torment is the guilt of the lie. The guilt of lying to that Indian woman would be my greatest torment forever. This is an excellent technique. External conflict, the captivity, gives way to internal conflict, moral agony, ensuring the story remains compelling even in a quiet setting. Foreshadowing by sound. The distant car and the harsh, roaring sound breaks the silence, acting as a dramatic herald for the climax. Then the rhythmic, heart-wrenching sound of a shovel and pickaxe is pure, cinematic tension. The sound is a war drum counting down to his end. The sound is the terror, there's the climax, near death and the sudden reversal. This section provides a powerful, visceral climax. The moment of absolute despair. Reuben's final walk to the pit. 30 meters. But to me, it felt like thousands upon thousands of steps, uses sensory detail to convey his utter psychological exhaustion. This is the all-is-lost moment. The live burial. The brutal, matter-of-fact live burial is the highest point of physical danger. The sensation of cold, heavy dirt poured over me with each shovel is a fantastic detail for a screenplay. It cuts his last ability to fight. I couldn't even scream. I was mute. The Deus ex machina plot twist. An absolute silence followed. It seemed the expert woman had, at the last moment, declared her readiness to cooperate. The burial is stopped, but the resolution is not a happy one. It's a compromise driven by the expert woman's surrender. This twist maintains the story's grim realism. He is saved, but only to face an even more painful reality. A broken leg, a liberation more painful than captivity itself. Fear the false ending and the true shock. The structure here employs a classic false ending to deepen the emotional impact. The Indian woman's return. The saying goodbye beat. Her final gaze at Reuben. The 1,000 unspoken words makes him believe she is going to her death. This is the ultimate payoff of his guilt, leading to his self-flagellation. I slammed my head against the wall. The gunshot, the sound of finality, the dry, harsh gunshot is the cue for the audience to believe the story is over for her. This sound is a terrifying form of audio closure. The true climax reversal. Victor's return. Victor's arrival saves Reuben's life, but not his soul. Reuben has hit his emotional nadir. My world is over. My soul is dead. The final shock, the reveal, the Indian woman's scream. It was the Indian woman's voice. She was alive! This is a brilliant narrative shock. It instantly invalidates Reuben's guilt, his weeping, and his belief that his lie caused her death. It is a moment of pure disorienting grace that he cannot process. This moment is the true climax for Reuben's internal arc. 5. Denouement, the wider world. The final section shifts from the intimate trauma to the logistics of the rescue, introducing the wider world of criminal networks. World building. The introduction of the Iranian Ludis is a key element of world building. Their description, rough, tattooed, scarred, immediately establishes them as a formidable, morally gray force. The expert woman's explanation provides culturally specific context. Arazeo bash vers luti haye ba marifat. This adds richness and moves the story away from the claustrophobic caravanserai. The plot pivot. The treasure. The discovery of priceless antiquities and the price tag, 300,000 euros each, pivots the story from a survival thriller to a heist smuggling story. The emotional stakes, life-death, are now intertwined with financial stakes, the treasure. In summary, this passage is a Screenwriting Masterclass, Session 5, Characterization. Good morning, class. Today, we move from structural plotting to the heart of any great screenplay. Characterization. A compelling story is simply a record of how interesting people respond to difficult situations. Character roles, protagonist, antagonist, and supporting cast. In this passage, we see clear examples of these three essential roles, often defined by their function in relation to the main conflict. Ruben's survival. The protagonist. Ruben, the man broken by guilt. Function. The character whose goal drives the central conflict, survival and escape. Defining trait in the passage. Moral guilt. He is not defined by his physical captivity, but by the burden of lying to the Indian woman. This immediately makes him a complex internal protagonist. In action, his self-hatred. Why did I lie to her? And his total psychological collapse, my soul is dead, are direct consequences of his moral failing, the lie, proving that his internal journey is more important than the external plot. B. The supporting characters, the Indian woman and Victor. Supporting characters serve to test, aid, or change the protagonist. The Indian woman, the catalyst, moral mirror. She is the emotional anchor for Ruben. Her initial decision, to accept death, highlights Ruben's own desperate will to live, but her subsequent suffering due to his lie becomes his personal hell. Her character arc, implied. She moves from desperate survivor, the coin flip story, to a state of complete peaceful resignation, choosing a noble death over further humiliation. Her eventual shocking return, alive, is the catalyst for Ruben's rebirth. It lifts his defining guilt. Victor, the rescuer, external force. He is the deus ex machina, the external solution. His role is to resolve the physical conflict. His single stunned line, good, perfectly encapsulates his function. He is a man of action, immediately assessing the situation and moving to rescue, while the expert woman and the Ludis handle the logistics. C. The antagonist, the con, the force of cruelty. Function. The primary obstacle to the protagonist's goal. Defining trait in the passage, arbitrary power and sadism. We don't see him much, but his presence is felt through his cruelty. The mummification threat. The coin flip, the demand for pleasure. He is the terrifying engine of the setting. In action. He only needs to be shown for one moment, when he is arguing with the expert woman, and then gestures to have Ruben buried alive, simply because the expert woman won't cooperate. This shows he uses human life as leverage and a tool for intimidation. T's character arc, the internal change. A character arc is the emotional or psychological change a character undergoes, usually from a flaw to a strength, or an inner lie to a truth. Ruben's arc in this passage, from self-deceit to self-acceptance. Status quo, pre-passage. Ruben is a captive fighting for physical survival. The lie, the flaw. He imposes a false hope on the Indian woman. Don't doubt it. Just stay alive. This makes him feel momentarily heroic, but introduces profound guilt. The low point, the lie's consequence. He is buried alive, pulled out broken, and then witnesses what he believes is her death, the gunshot. His world ends. My soul is dead. I hated myself. He accepts his flaw as his eternal truth. He is convinced he murdered her spirit. The revelation, the climax. The Indian woman screams. She is alive. The revelation is so profound it paralyzes him. His guilt, his defining trait for 2 days, is instantly wiped clean. New status quo. He is physically broken but psychologically resurrected. He is no longer driven by guilt but by the shock of grace. He can now move forward, ready for the next phase of the story, the escape loot. A successful character arc is earned. Reuben's resurrection is only powerful because his preceding despair and self-hatred were absolute. Third, exercise. Writing a character profile and introduction scene. Now let's apply these concepts. The most memorable characters have a clear want, external goal, and a need, internal flaw, lesson. Your task is to create a profile for a new supporting character and write their introduction scene. We will use one of the characters briefly mentioned in the final section. The leader of the Ludis, the Iranian ruffians. Character profile. Jabbar, the honorable ruffian. External want. To secure the full $300,000 euros per man from the antiquities sale to support his crew and his family back home. Internal need. To prove that his loyalty and old-school honor, the meaning of Ludi, are more valuable and powerful than the brutality of men like the Khan. He needs to validate his moral code. Defining action. He never steals from the poor or breaks a promise, even to a criminal rival. He only targets those who prey on the weak. Visual, muscular, in his late 40s. A neatly trimmed but long beard, a sharp, intelligent gaze that contrasts with the deep, amateurish scar running from his eyebrow to his jawline, a permanent mark of an old, bloody loyalty. Practice scene, Jabbar's introduction. Context: Reuben, Victor, and the Indian woman have just been led outside the caravanserai by the armed Iranians. Ex-caravanserai. Night. 4 black Toyota Prados idle, their lights illuminating a group of 10 burly Iranian men. They are scarred, tattooed. In the center, a large man, Jabbar, 40s, stands. He is clearly in charge. He wears a heavy, clean leather coat. Jabbar's eyes go immediately to Reuben, who is covered in dirt, pale, leaning heavily on Victor. Jabbar gives no sign of pity or shock, only a slow, critical assessment. Victor is on a satellite phone, speaking in a low, urgent voice. Jabbar, to the Indian woman in Farsi, "You are well? Tell me the truth." Indian woman, a nod. "Safe, yes. Thanks to your men. But the Khan, he is still alive?" Jabbar's jaw tightens. He does not look at her. His gaze sweeps the desolate desert compound. Jabbar, Farsi, a necessary complication. He will not be a problem again, my word. 2 of Jabbar's men haul out a heavy, ornate wooden chest from the Khan's former room. They drop it with a thud onto the dirt. The men gather around it, their rough faces illuminated by the Prados' headlights. Eager anticipation. Jabbar to his men Farsi. "The payment for 2 months of waiting, open it." The lock is smashed. The lid opens. A hush falls over the group as the moonlight catches the gleam of priceless gold artifacts. Victor, into phone German. "Salvador, the collection is here. It's better than we hoped." Jabbar takes the satellite phone from Victor, dismissing him with a casual wave. Jabbar, into phone calm, serious Farsi. "This is Jabbar. The shipment is confirmed. Safe passage is your job. Our job is done." The price is not negotiable. He pauses, listening. He looks at Reuben, taking in the broken leg, the blood, the dirt. A tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of respect crosses his face. Jabbar, into phone louder. 300,000 euros each. We do not haggle when lives have been put on the line. You tell Salvador that the Ludihe Bamarefat do not deal in cheap rescues. He hangs up, tossing the phone back to Victor. He looks down at the chest, then up at the vast, cold desert sky. His character is introduced. Hard, dangerous, professional, and bound by a unique criminal code of honor. Your next step. Your task is to take this scene and write a brief analysis, 3 paragraphs, focusing on how Jabbar's dialogue and actions reveal his internal need to prove his honor, despite his criminal occupation. Welcome, everyone. Today, we step into the beating heart of screenwriting, character. Plots can be borrowed, genres recycled, even dialogues echoed from other films. But characters, when they live, breathe, and bleed, are what make stories immortal. In this session, we'll explore 4 key pillars of characterization. 1. The protagonist, hero. 2. The antagonist, villain. 3. The supporting characters, allies and foils. The character arc. The invisible bridge between who they are and who they become. And finally, we'll end with a creative exercise, crafting a character profile and a scene of introduction. Part 1, the nature of character. A character is not a collection of traits. It's a pattern of behavior under pressure. You don't truly know someone until they're forced to make a choice that costs them something. This is where screenwriting differs from literature. Cinema doesn't tell us who someone is. It shows it through what they do. In simple terms, action reveals character. Conflict tests character. Change defines character. Think of your characters as dynamic systems, emotional, moral, and psychological organisms in constant motion. Part 2, the protagonist, the engine of the story. Your protagonist is not simply the good guy. They are the active center of your narrative, the person whose decisions propel the plot forward. A strong protagonist must have 1. A clear goal, what they want. 2. A deep need, what they really need, often unconsciously. 3. A flaw or wound, something broken that prevents them from seeing the truth. 4. A transformation, the process by which they change or fail to change. Example. In Whiplash, Andrew wants to be the greatest jazz drummer. His goal is greatness, but his need is balance and self-acceptance. His flaw is arrogance and obsession. His arc takes him through humiliation, cruelty, and ultimately, a violent kind of self-realization. A protagonist must be active, not passive. Even when they fail, it should be because of their own decisions. Audiences forgive mistakes. They never forgive indecision. Part 3. The antagonist. The mirror and the shadow. The antagonist is not always the villain. They are the force of opposition, the mirror that reflects the hero's flaws. A well-written antagonist believes they are the hero of their own story, forces the protagonist to confront their weakness, embodies the opposite worldview or moral stance. For instance, in The Dark Knight, the Joker is not just chaos for chaos's sake. He's a philosophical test. He believes morality is a mask that people wear until things fall apart. Batman's journey is not about beating the Joker. It's about proving that ethics can survive anarchy. When creating your antagonist, ask yourself, what truth are they trying to defend? And how does that truth threaten the protagonist's illusion? Part 4. Supporting characters. The circle of reflection. Supporting characters exist to refract aspects of the protagonist. Each one reveals something hidden in the main character through contrast, irony, or empathy. There are 3 main functions. 1. The ally. Mentor, friend, partner, helps the protagonist grow. Example, Obi-Wan to Luke Skywalker. or Morpheus to Neo. 2. The foil. Contrast the hero's flaws. Example: Dr. Watson's grounded logic versus Sherlock Holmes's chaos. 3. The catalyst. Pushes the hero into change, sometimes unintentionally. Example: the Indian woman in Reuben's Nightmare, a reflection of Reuben's suppressed guilt and compassion. A supporting character should never exist just to decorate the frame. If you remove them, the protagonist's journey should collapse in some way. Part V, the character arc, the invisible transformation. The character arc is the invisible skeleton of every great story. It's the internal journey that mirrors the external one. The arc typically moves through 3 stages. When set up, lie. The character begins with a false belief about the world or themselves. Example: power means safety. 2. Confrontation, truth. The story tests that belief through conflict. Example: the more power they gain, the lonelier they become. 3. Resolution, change. The character either embraces the truth or perishes clinging to the lie. Example: safety doesn't come from control, it comes from trust. The external plot, chases, battles, love stories, are all metaphors for this inner transformation. A story without an arc is motion without meaning. Part 6, the scene of introduction. The first moment your character appears on screen tells the audience everything they need to know, and not by words, but by behavior. A perfect introduction combines environment, where we meet them; action, what they're doing; conflict, what interrupts them; choice, how they react. For example, Indiana Jones doesn't say, "I'm brave and clever." He reveals it when he faces a collapsing cave, outsmarts traps, and keeps his cool while others panic. That's cinematic characterization. When writing your scene, think of it as a visual thesis statement for your hero's identity. Part 7, writing exercise. Exercise 1, character profile. Create a short character profile, 1 paragraph, including name, age, and background. Greatest desire, deepest fear, moral flaw or wound. Hidden contradiction, something they say versus something they do. Exercise 2, scene of introduction. Write 1 scene, no more than 1 page, introducing your protagonist. Show who they are through action and conflict, not description. Ask yourself, if this were the only scene I could show the audience, would they understand my character? Part 8, closing thoughts. Stories endure because they remind us of our shared humanity. Characters are the vessels of that truth. They let us live 1,000 lives, make 1,000 mistakes, and still come back wiser. When your character changes, the audience feels that change inside themselves. That's why screenwriting at its core isn't about structure or style, it's about empathy. So as you begin your exercise, remember, you're not just writing who they are, you're writing who they could become.